Today, we're taking a deep dive into how the 2026 mandatory minicamp wrapped up at Cross Country Mortgage Campus in Berea, Ohio, because what unfolded over those 3 days, June 9th through June 11th, completely shook up a Cleveland quarterback battle that many insiders thought had already been settled. Some members of the media had convinced themselves they already knew the ending. In their minds, the decision had been made long ago. The starter was supposedly already chosen. But then SHEDEUR Sanders stepped onto that field, and suddenly every neat little storyline started falling apart. He forced Todd Monken to pay attention. He made it impossible for anyone to simply dismiss him. And once again, Mary Kay Cabot entered another press conference armed with the same question she has been asking all spring, only to run straight into Monken's calm and unwavering response. And trust me, you won't believe this, because that steady wall from Monken may actually be the best thing that has happened to SHEDEUR Sanders all offseason. But before we break down minicamp itself, before we go through every quote, every rep, and every clue coming out of Berea, we need to understand how this entire story reached this point. Because this quarterback battle didn't suddenly appear in June. This has been brewing ever since Todd Monken arrived as the new head coach of the franchise. So let's rewind all the way back to the NFL scouting combine in February, when Monken first sat down with reporters and explained how he planned to approach the position. He was asked directly about the quarterback room, about SHEDEUR Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Dillon Gabriel, and everyone wanted one clear answer. His response was simple: still to be determined. No promises for Watson, no guarantees for Sanders, and no crown being handed to anyone. And the most interesting part is that he meant exactly what he said. Reports from that period made it clear that Monken never intended to split reps evenly, but instead wanted them distributed in a way that would give his staff the best opportunity to properly evaluate every player on the roster. He was building a process, and because the media loves filling in blanks, they immediately started creating answers Monken refused to provide. And what did those assumptions turn into? The narrative sounded pretty familiar. Deshaun Watson was the veteran. Deshaun Watson had the experience. Deshaun Watson fits a pro-style offense better. Deshaun Watson supposedly held the advantage. That was the message coming out of Berea throughout the voluntary OTAs. And to be fair, there was at least some truth to it in the beginning. Watson was receiving plenty of first-team opportunities. He carried the bigger name. He was viewed as the established presence in the room. Meanwhile, SHEDEUR Sanders, entering his second season after an up-and-down rookie year, was still being developed and evaluated without any indication that he had completely seized control of the competition. Reports leading into minicamp suggested that Watson maintained the edge throughout most of the spring because of his athletic ability and experience. In fact, certain voices around Cleveland believed minicamp would serve as little more than a formality. They expected Monken to finish those 3 days and officially signal that Watson was heading into training camp as the clear QB1. That was the expectation. That was the script everyone was waiting for. But SHEDEUR Sanders had a different plan, and this is where the story really changed. On June 9th, Sanders stepped onto the practice field and became the first quarterback to take reps with the first-team offense during 11-on-11 work. Not a rotation, not a split. First team. And then he immediately made those opportunities count. He connected with rookie first-round receiver Denzel Boston on a deep touchdown. Then he struck again, finding Isaiah Bond for another score. 2 explosive plays, 2 deep passes, 2 touchdowns during competitive 11-on-11 action on the very first day of mandatory minicamp. And afterward, when reporters asked Todd Monken about Sanders, the head coach offered a response that should make people pay attention. He simply said that SHEDEUR had done a nice job and had been improving with every practice. Better with every practice. That is your head coach telling you the arrow is pointing upward. And in my opinion, comments like that are never accidental. This is a coach who has watched both quarterbacks every day and carefully documented everything. And every public remark he has made about SHEDEUR Sanders has carried a positive tone. On day 2, Sanders shifted to second-team reps as part of Monken's evaluation process, but the production continued. He connected with tight ends Brendan Bates and Blake Whiteheart, showing patience through his reads and displaying comfort with different personnel packages. And here's the part that many people are overlooking in this entire conversation, and this is where my first personal takeaway comes into play. When a quarterback can step in and produce with both the first team unit and the backups, that tells you something important about his understanding of the game. It tells you the moment is not too big for him, and that his success is not tied exclusively to having star targets around him. SHEDEUR Sanders is out there with the second group, making connections with players nobody is writing headlines about. He is completing throws, sustaining drives, and operating the offense efficiently. That is what a professional quarterback looks like when he handles business. And the people who have spent months insisting that this kid is not ready need to seriously deal with that reality. Then came day 3, the final practice of mandatory minicamp on June 11th. And Todd Monken made what I believe was the most revealing move of the entire offseason. He divided the first team reps evenly between Sanders and Deshaun Watson before the team headed into the summer break. Equal opportunities. Both quarterbacks worked with the starters. Both players received the same chance with the top personnel before training camp arrives in late July. Now stop and think about what that actually means. If a head coach has already decided that Deshaun Watson is unquestionably his starter, he does not hand out equal first-team reps on the last evaluation day of the spring. He gives Watson those opportunities. He allows him to continue building chemistry with the starters. He sends everyone into the break with no doubt about who sits at the top of the depth chart. But Monken did not do that. Instead, he split the reps evenly and then walked to the podium afterward and made his position crystal clear. He said both Sanders and Watson have earned the right to compete for the starting job. Not one quarterback, both quarterbacks. And Monken went even further by saying he believes both players are capable of playing winning football in 2026. He believes it, not hopes for it, not wishes for it, believes it. And trust me, that wording matters. Now let's talk about what Monken specifically said regarding SHEDEUR Sanders, because this is where the story gets really interesting. According to multiple reporters covering the Browns that week, Monken explained that Sanders has become much more decisive with the football. He said the quarterback is processing faster and making quicker choices. He also noted that the ball is leaving Sanders' hands with greater urgency. And then came the statement you really need to remember, because this one stood out. Monken said Sanders' improved ability to process information, deliver the ball quickly, and
avoiding negative plays is going to be huge for the Browns' offense when it comes to stacking successful plays and putting points on the board. Huge. That is your head coach using that word while talking about what SHEDEUR Sanders is showing in practice. That is not some meaningless compliment. That is not a coach simply trying to keep everyone happy. That is a head coach identifying a specific area of growth and directly linking it to what his offense needs to thrive. Monken runs an aggressive play-action system built around rhythm, timing, and turning first downs into scoring drives. In that type of offense, quick processing and eliminating negative plays are not optional. They are essential. And the man running that system is standing in front of microphones telling you that SHEDEUR Sanders is displaying exactly those qualities. And this is where my opinion starts to heat up, because something needs to be said about a criticism that has followed Sanders since his Colorado days. The conversation has always centered around the same thing: holding the ball too long, extending plays, and hunting for big shots instead of taking easy completions and living for another down. That criticism followed him through the NFL Combine. It followed him during training camp last year. It became one of the reasons many people justified his slide to the 5th round, and it resurfaced again whenever he struggled during his rookie season. According to analytical data from that season, Sanders averaged roughly 3 1/3 seconds before releasing the football. That ranked on the slower side among NFL quarterbacks, and he faced pressure on more than half of his dropbacks during his starts, one of the highest percentages in the entire league. Those are legitimate concerns. Those were issues that absolutely needed to improve if he wanted to take the next step in his career. And now, here we are, in June of 2026, with his own head coach publicly telling everyone that those exact problems are being corrected, that the ball is coming out faster and the reads are happening quicker. The very issue critics have pointed to for years is now the same area his head coach is highlighting as a strength. And if you support SHEDEUR Sanders, you won't believe this, because that might be the biggest development of the entire offseason, period. And it's also important to pay attention to what the Browns' quarterbacks coach had to say. According to reports coming out of minicamp, Browns quarterbacks coach Mike Bajakian was very transparent about what training camp in pads is expected to reveal. He explained that once the pads come on, quarterbacks are finally dealing with live bullets that OTAs and minicamp simply cannot replicate. He pointed out that when the pass rush is attacking at full speed and decisions have to be made instantly, evaluations become quicker and much more accurate. He also said he expects the competition to sort itself out rather quickly once training camp begins, with preseason games ultimately serving as the final test. Now, I want you to really focus on the wording he used. He said the competition would reveal itself, not that Deshaun Watson would automatically separate from the pack, and not that the veteran advantage would suddenly become obvious. He simply said the competition would decide itself. That tells me this coaching staff genuinely does not know who their Week 1 starter is, and they are being refreshingly honest about it. And the reason that uncertainty exists is because SHEDEUR Sanders played well enough throughout the spring to make this decision difficult. If Sanders had struggled or looked average, this conversation would have ended a long time ago. The fact that it hasn't ended is the story. Now let's shift over to Deshaun Watson, because if we're going to break this down, we have to keep it balanced. I am not here to take shots at a player who has gone through one of the toughest physical stretches any NFL quarterback has faced in recent years. 2 Achilles injuries, 2 surgeries, and nearly 2 seasons away from meaningful football activity. He missed the entire 2025 season while SHEDEUR Sanders was trying to keep the Browns competitive. And to his credit, Watson entered the spring saying everything you would want to hear from a veteran quarterback. Based on his own comments during minicamp, he said this is the healthiest he has felt since suffering that first Achilles injury back in Week 7 of the 2024 season. He emphasized how valuable it was to participate in the entire off-season program, every voluntary workout, every OTA, and every minicamp session. He also made it clear that he approaches this competition with the same mentality every player should have, which is to start and win football games. And honestly, I respect that. I truly do. But here's where reality enters the conversation, and I'm going to keep it completely honest with you. Deshaun Watson's body of work in Cleveland simply has not been impressive. When you step back and look at everything since the Browns traded for him and handed him that fully guaranteed $230 million contract, the results speak for themselves. Watson has posted a 9-10 record as a starter with Cleveland. His quarterback numbers have been below league average. He only completed 1 full season in 2023 before injuries once again changed everything. He went 1-6 in 2024 before the Achilles injury ended that campaign, and then re-injured it months later, costing him the entire 2025 season. Now he enters 2026 in the final year of that massive deal, battling a 24-year-old second-year quarterback who forced a competition many believed would never truly exist. That's where things stand right now. And maybe the most revealing detail of all is this. The Browns easily could have handed Watson the job without hesitation. They could have leaned on his experience, given him all the first-team reps, and built chemistry around him throughout the spring. Instead, they chose a different path. Todd Monken made that choice, and in my opinion, that decision tells you everything you need to know about how the organization views its future at quarterback. But there's another voice in this story that hasn't received enough attention, and that's Tyson Campbell. Campbell lines up against these quarterbacks every single day in practice. He has no agenda and no reason to favor one side. He isn't worried about protecting feelings or helping maintain headlines. He's simply speaking on what he sees. And what Campbell publicly said during minicamp should make people pay attention. He revealed that from the time he arrived last season until now, the growth he's witnessed from SHEDEUR Sanders has been significant. He praised the way Sanders carries himself and said he is acting even more professionally than he did a year ago. He also mentioned that Sanders is becoming increasingly comfortable and confident making plays. And remember, that's coming from a defensive player. That's the opposition telling you that the quarterback they're facing today is not the same player they faced 12 months ago.
When your own defense starts praising the growth of a quarterback, that's not something you can simply brush aside. That's real validation from the people who know the truth best. And while we're discussing the culture surrounding SHEDEUR Sanders, there's another point worth mentioning. Back when Todd Monken first announced that the quarterback situation would remain open, Sanders publicly said that was exactly what he expected. He explained that every single day he has to prove himself to everyone, including himself. He described the competition as a series of small victories. Reach your goals, hit your checkpoints, and eventually those little wins turn into something bigger. Now, compare that mindset to the stories that surrounded SHEDEUR during the 2025 draft process, when questions about his attitude and confidence dominated the conversation. Fast forward 1 year, and here he is entering his second NFL offseason, speaking like a seasoned veteran who understands growth and accountability. That's the mental fortitude you admire.
Maturity. That's a young player evolving into a professional, and according to reports, Todd Monken has absolutely noticed that growth. The way Sanders attacks his preparation, studies film, and approaches every day inside the building has stood out to the new coaching staff. Reports from early spring even indicated that Monken noticed Sanders was consistently in the facility working while other quarterbacks weren't around nearly as much. That commitment didn't go unnoticed. It created the foundation, and when practices finally began, SHEDEUR was prepared to build on everything he had invested. We also need to spend a moment discussing Dillon Gabriel, because this quarterback battle cannot be explained without mentioning his role. When the Browns selected Gabriel in the 3rd round of the 2025 draft, ahead of SHEDEUR Sanders, who slipped all the way to the 5th round, many believed Gabriel would be the quarterback who pushed Sanders completely out of the picture. That narrative absolutely existed. Gabriel had the college resume, the accuracy, and the profile many scouts loved. But as we head deeper into the summer, the truth is becoming impossible to ignore. Dillon Gabriel has quietly faded into the background of this competition. The conversation has become SHEDEUR Sanders versus Deshaun Watson. Gabriel remains on the roster and continues to work, but when Todd Monken and his coaching staff speak publicly, they consistently talk about 2 quarterbacks, not 3. That alone tells you everything you need to know about where Dillon Gabriel currently stands in this evaluation. And the fact that SHEDEUR Sanders has managed to distance himself from another second-year quarterback who was selected several rounds ahead of him is yet another sign that the former Colorado star is doing something right. Now, let me give you my personal thoughts on the media side of this story, because I think this conversation needs to happen, and I'm going to be completely honest because somebody has to say it. There has been a segment of the Cleveland media that, in my opinion, has never truly evaluated SHEDEUR Sanders with a completely open mind. And I want to explain exactly what I mean, because this goes beyond hot takes. When Deshaun Watson was taking most of the first-team reps early in OTAs, the message was basically that everything was unfolding exactly as expected. Watson's experience was being highlighted. Then, when Sanders began gaining ground toward the end of OTAs, the tone suddenly shifted to, well, it's not padded football yet, let's wait and see. Suddenly, the focus became Watson's athleticism and veteran advantage. When minicamp started and Sanders exploded on day 1, some of those same voices immediately began attaching disclaimers. It's not padded football, it's not a real game, we need more evidence. Nothing SHEDEUR Sanders accomplishes seems to be accepted without conditions attached. Everything comes with an asterisk. And let me be clear, I'm not saying anybody has to crown him today. I'm simply saying that if the results had been reversed, many people would have already declared Watson the unquestioned starter. That double standard is real, and I think it's worth pointing out. Now, the preseason timeline becomes the biggest storyline heading into the summer. Reports following minicamps suggested this competition could stretch all the way through the first 2 preseason games, with Cleveland visiting Chicago on August 15th and then returning home to face Buffalo on August 22nd. That's how committed Todd Monken appears to be when it comes to seeing the full picture before making a final decision. And think about what that means for SHEDEUR Sanders. He's going to get preseason opportunities. He's going to get meaningful reps with pads on. He's finally going to face those live bullets Mike Bajakian talked about. And if he performs in preseason the same way he's performed all spring, decisive, efficient, getting the ball out quickly and making smart reads, then there won't be much left to debate. At that point, the job will belong to him. And that's what this entire minicamp story is really about. It isn't just about 3 practices in June. It's about momentum. It's about a young quarterback who has been doubted every step of the way. Doubted during the draft. Doubted when he fell to the 5th round behind a 3rd-round quarterback. Doubted after an uneven rookie season behind an offensive line that allowed pressure on more than half of his dropbacks. Doubted when a new coaching staff arrived and refused to hand him the keys. Every time people were given a reason to write SHEDEUR Sanders off, they took it. And every time SHEDEUR Sanders had a chance to break, he went back to work and answered with his play. He delivered deep touchdown passes to Denzel Boston and Isaiah Bond during competitive 11-on-11 minicamp sessions. He built chemistry with tight ends, running backs, and receivers from multiple units. He earned praise from his head coach, his quarterback's coach, and even defensive teammates who line up against him every day. And perhaps most importantly, he forced Todd Monken, a coach who could have easily handed the job to the expensive veteran and moved on, to stand in front of reporters and publicly say that both quarterbacks have earned the right to compete, and that he believes both are capable of winning football games. And with all due respect to Mary Kay, Todd Monken is not going to rush that answer. The reason he hasn't made a decision yet is because SHEDEUR Sanders refuses to let the story end. This kid isn't finished. He's only 24 years old, he's entering his second season, he switched to number 2 before this year as a message that he's coming for something bigger. And ever since the 2025 season ended, he has been inside that building, putting in the work. He's not chasing sympathy, he's chasing a starting job. And heading into the biggest training camp of his young career, SHEDEUR Sanders finds himself in the strongest position he's ever been in to make that dream a reality. In just 5 weeks, the pads come on in Berea, and the real battle officially begins. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next, because this quarterback competition is turning into one of the most fascinating stories Cleveland has seen in years. So before you leave, I want to hear from you. Do you think SHEDEUR Sanders takes complete control once the pads come on, or does Deshaun Watson still have enough left to reclaim the job?